Why does the Mafia still fear this man? The Mafia is an Italian word that loosely translates to an association of evil people. In modern times, it's best known for its brutal crime organizations, with roots dating back to 19th century Sicily. Throughout their existence, the Mafia have been known to use any means necessary to achieve their goals. And while they were never a group to shy away from violence, there are some things that even the Mafia won't do. One of them being kill this man. But why? This is the man that the Mafia will not kill. His name is Santino De Matteo. He was born in San Giovanni a Tiberio in the 1920s. By all accounts, his life began like any other Italian male at the time. By age 14, he had already learned to read and write, but he couldn't afford school, so he began working in construction. While working in construction, Santino became friends with another worker named Tito. And when Tito went to serve in World War II, Santino promised to save him a job. When Tito came back from the war, he did indeed have a job waiting for him, except it wasn't at the construction site. It was at a local Mafia bar. Santino was going to run the bar with Tito, but soon realized that owning a bar in the Mafia was a lot like being a fish in water. There were no rules, and the only thing keeping you safe was how well you could swim. There was also money to be made, lots of it. And despite the fact that owning a bar in the Mafia meant your life would be constantly in danger, Santino loved every minute of it. Not long after he started working at the bar, he met a girl named Pina, who would later become his wife. Together, the couple had 5 children, all boys. And with such a large family to feed, Santino knew he needed to make sure his bar was doing everything it could to survive. The bar itself was called the White Horse Tavern, and it was doing okay. But to really make it big, Santino knew he needed to expand. He took out a loan and bought several trucks so he could transport goods across the country. Soon, the White Horse Tavern was raking in the cash. But the more money you make, the more enemies you get. And one of Santino's competitors in the shipping business was none other than Michele Greco. Michele was a prominent Mafia boss who ran a powerful crime family in Sicily. And when Santino refused to pay him a protection fee, Michele decided to teach him a lesson. One day, Santino was driving down the road when suddenly several men blocked his path. It was Michele and his goons, and they told Santino he had 2 choices, either pay up or get hurt. Santino didn't back down and told Michele where he could shove his protection money out. That was when Michele pulled out his gun and shot Santino in the leg. Santino had learned the hard way that if you don't pay the Mafia, they will hurt you. And he'd actually seen this happen to someone else before. In 1946, one of Santino's friends named Bernardo was killed by the Mafia because he owed them money. Bernardo worked for the Mafia transporting stolen goods. One day, Bernardo was transporting a truckload of salami when the Mafia bosses discovered he'd been stealing from them. They confronted him and demanded the money. Bernardo said he didn't have any money, and the Mafia bosses didn't believe him, so they killed him. They left his body in the street as a warning to anyone who might consider betraying them. It was this kind of mentality that forced most people in the Mafia to comply with whatever demands the bosses had. After all, what choice did they have? If you say no to the Mafia, they will hurt you. And in many cases, they'll kill you. So why didn't Santino just pay Michele and forget about it? Well, it wasn't that simple. Paying up was basically admitting that Michele was right. He had to pay a protection fee. And once you admit that, it's very difficult to get out. Santino was willing to pay for his safety, but he wasn't going to do it without putting up a fight. He agreed to meet with Michele to discuss terms, but then he went straight to the police. While Santino may have been a Mafia boss himself, he wasn't a complete monster. He knew that paying Michele would not only force him to pay forever, but it would also give Michele enough power to potentially control all of Sicily. When Santino met with Michele, he asked for 2 weeks to come up with the money. Michele agreed, and during those 2 weeks, Santino gathered evidence that would bring down the entire crime family. And when he presented it to the police, they were shocked. Michele and his entire crime family were arrested. And while Santino had saved himself and his business, he knew it would only make him a target. The Mafia doesn't take kindly to snitching, and Santino had just given them the biggest reason ever to come after him. Santino's worst fears were soon realized when the Mafia came after him and his family. But Santino was prepared. He had armed bodyguards everywhere, and the police were watching over them. No matter how hard the Mafia tried, they couldn't get to Santino or his family. Over the years, Santino's power grew, and now he was the one calling the shots. While he may have started off simply selling drinks, he eventually owned much of Sicily's shipping industry, and it seemed as though nothing could stop him. That was until the government brought in a new prosecutor named Giovanni Falcone. Giovanni was a tough guy who wasn't afraid to take on the Mafia. He had helped put several high-ranking members behind bars, and now he was coming for Santino. Giovanni had been tracking Santino's financial dealings, and he had enough evidence to put him away for life. Santino knew he was in trouble, and he attempted to bribe Giovanni, but he refused. Giovanni had built up walls around his heart so high that no amount of money could break them down. Santino knew he couldn't win against Giovanni in court, so he tried to take him out. First, he had a car accident staged, so Giovanni would be too injured to pursue the case. But Giovanni survived, and he continued on with the prosecution. Santino then tried to hire a hitman to take Giovanni out, but he was caught before he could do anything. As more and more of Santino's men were arrested, he became desperate. His final attempt was to have Giovanni killed by one of his own people. He approached Giovanni's wife and told her that her husband was having an affair. She confronted Giovanni, and he admitted it was true. Enraged, she agreed to help Santino kill him. But while Giovanni lay dead in the street, his wife was nowhere to be found. It turned out she had taken her own life. All of this was part of Santino's plan. He figured that by killing Giovanni, framing his wife for the murder, and then taking his own life afterward, he would finally escape justice. But again, he was wrong. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the judge didn't hesitate to convict him. Before he could even finish his life, he was behind bars for the rest of it. It was at this point that Santino realized he'd been outplayed. Giovanni Falcone had anticipated Santino's every move, and it had all been a trap. Despite his cooperation, Santino was sentenced to 12 years in prison. But as he aged, he knew he wouldn't make it out alive. On January 10, 2004, Santino died of a heart attack at the age of 78. Even though he was one of the most feared crime bosses in history, no one mourned his passing. To the people of Sicily, he was a symbol of greed and corruption. And to the police, he was a symbol of evil. As for Giovanni Falcone, he lived out the remainder of his life knowing that he had brought down one of the most powerful crime families in history. He died in 2018 at the age of 83, leaving behind a legacy that would live on for years to come. Now you know why the Mafia still fears this man. But do you know why the Mafia won't kill you? Check out this video next to find out.